Controversy. Oh, yes, we have controversy. Long range shooting, long range hunting. We are going to discuss the aspects of that. First of all, we have Joseph Von Benedikt from Backcountry Hunting Podcast, and you're going to get to tell us what you think the right side of this is. We're not going to absolutely tell you, or are we? Maybe.
Well, it is a trend, Ron. It's something that we can't ignore. We can't pretend isn't occurring because it's maybe the biggest trend, that and suppressor use in the modern hunting scene, at least here in the West, the wide open West where you and I call home.
All right. So that is the show tonight on Ron Spomer Outdoors podcast. Let's dive right into it. Joseph, I know you've done a lot of target shooting long range, which I think is the proper application for long range bullets, cartridges, and shooting. But when we start talking about applying that to the hunting fields, I have got some issues with it. Am I off base by thinking that it might be a little smarter move for most hunters to stick to a little bit closer range rather than trying to stretch it out?
No, I don't think you're off track there at all. There is a demographic of hunter that achieves what I'll call long range ethical lethality. But man, you've got to live, sleep, breathe, and eat that process, that passion. You can't be a cyclist. You can't go and compete in Ironman stuff. You got to be like, long range is where it's at. That's all I care about. Maybe you can have a family too, but that's questionable.
Questionable? Oh boy. that narrows it right down. Well, there you go, folks. There's your answer.
So, yeah, I mean, it's just a controversial process because so many people say, geez, you're not even hunting anymore. You're just sniping at deer or elk or whatever. You're not giving them a chance, which that's a different ball of wax. But a good hunter never gives his quarry notice that he's there. You're going to be shooting at the back end of a running animal, and that's controversial too.
That is a good point.
So the long range shooting community, I'm with you. I think long range practice on targets, whether it's paper targets in competition, steel targets, whatever, is an invaluable practice method.
Mm-hmm.
You can learn to shoot better than any other way, especially if you're shooting some of these newer matches like the NRL Hunter matches where you're shooting steel targets shaped like animals from various field positions against a clock. They put pressure on you, and at some pretty extended ranges. You're going to learn wind calls. You're going to learn to run your rifle effectively. You'll learn to achieve very stable field shooting positions in a hurry. All of this really benefits you in the field. So, maybe you've learned to hit a cougar, a steel life-size cougar target at 900 yards every time. Then when you have a big mule deer step out at 430 yards, you're going to make that shot very, very capably. So shooting at targets I don't think there's any debate about whether or not that's ethical or valuable long-range practice.
Right. Yeah. Now, you brought up three things. Field positions, critical for good, successful hunting. You've got to practice that. And this is a great way to practice it. Whether you're 300 yards is your long range or 600 yards is your long range or 1,000, the further you go, the more critical your field position for stability is in that entire operation.
Yes.
So that's one. The other one is knowing your equipment and how to operate it. If you're out shooting at targets, and let's say you address a target at 500 yards and you hit it, and then you want to try one at 800, you're going to have to make some adjustments. This is not the time to be thinking, how do I adjust my scope? How do what am I using? Am I going to use my ballistic reticles in this scope? Am I going to turn my dials? You need to be able to do that instantly. This is where the practice on the targets comes into play. And then what was the third one you said was a critical component?
Judging wind.
Oh, that is the most critical one because you get everything else nailed down and the wind changes. You're done.
That's the joker in the deck.
Yeah.
And I can't stress how important it is to have those processes down like you're talking about, Ron. So many people, they'll put a shell in the chamber, close the bolt, shoot the target off a bench when they're getting ready to go hunt.
Yeah.
If they hit their target, they're like, I'm good. Man, you need to be running ammo from your magazine so you know whether or not your rifle feeds well. You need to be running it quickly and slowly and quietly. know all these things, know how to load it without looking at it.
Mhm.
All these things are skills that you'll pick up if you do a fair amount of long range shooting, and many others to boot. Another great skill that you'll learn in these matches, or just by getting out with your pals and shooting at steel targets, is the ability to spot your own impacts, assuming your rifle's set up
Yeah,
properly,
that's difficult.
and then to follow up effectively.
Yeah.
I've got kids that I've raised up through the into the hunting passion, and thankfully all of them seem to have the fire in the belly. I don't get to hunt much around home anymore. My official title is Father Guide. But what I've taught them from the very beginning is to not rely on their first shot. You've got to plan on a second shot. And the reason is, the first time I saw my little boy shoot a deer years and years ago, it needed a follow-up shot. It actually didn't, but we thought it did. And he came apart at the seams. He had what another friend of mine calls a high-speed come apart. And couldn't get a cartridge chambered. He couldn't find the deer again, because suddenly he felt like he failed and his deer was getting away, right? Ever since, I've taught him, make a plan. Just expect to shoot a follow-up shot, maybe 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And that way, when the need arises, you're already processing toward that. And it's just part of the whole experience.
That's good. I mean, I always advocate you should be planning to take your game with the first shot. Otherwise, why shoot? If you are not supremely confident you're going to make this shot, why shoot and hope you get on your second or third shot? I think that's a problem with too many hunters. They just figure, I got plenty of firepower here, I'll just start throwing lead.
And I agree with you 100%. Don't take that first shot until you're sure you can make it. However, we're human.
Yes.
The wind is evil sometimes, and equipment is fallible. It's not infallible. So things can happen. And when it does, if you're not prepared and expectant, if you're not mentally geared up to stay in the game, you can become frazzled.
Well, this is where practice, and it doesn't even have to be long range. You can be doing this at 200, 300 yards. I think it is important that you're off the bench, you're in a field position.
Yes.
You're using your shooting sticks, or your bipod, or your sit, your pack, however you steady your rifle. Going through all those steps, saying this first shot is going to score, but should something go south, what am I going to do next? You're not going to lift your head up and admire your handiwork.
Yeah.
You're going to stay in your gun, reacquire your target after recoil, cycle that action immediately so that you are ready for your next shot should it be necessary. Ideally, it'll never happen. You'll never need that second shot, but by golly, this is where your practice on long range, medium range, any range, but field shooting really comes into play.
Yes.
Okay, so you've locked that down. Now you're extending your range because you're getting more efficient at it, and you're gaining the confidence. This is the huge thing. When you start going clang, clang at distance, when it takes some second for that sound to come back and you go, oh, I hit it. You shouldn't go, oh, I hit it. You should go, of course I hit it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you shouldn't be doing this, right? That's why you do the long range shooting, and build up that confidence. And that helps so much on your normal hunting shots. Now, I'm going to jump right into that, to what I consider to be ethical hunting shots. And I will go with an experienced long-range shooter who really knows his equipment, blah, blah, blah. 300 yards to me is a lock. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to train to be a good 300-yard shot. Now, should you have issues, don't extend it. If you can't do 300, don't try 4.
Right.
You better be hitting that 10-inch target every time at 300 or not shooting. Then you might build on it and get to 400, 500. Now we're getting to where I'm saying, it's not about you anymore. You're starting to add in the equipment and the wind.
Yes.
The bullet, the trajectory, the windage, all of these things at the time of flight, I think, is what narrows it down. No matter how good you are with your rifle, no matter how accurate, the time that it requires for your brain to say, fire, your finger to move, the cartridge to explode, the gases to push the bullet out the barrel. It sounds like it's all instantaneous, but there's a little bit of time in there, and milliseconds matter.
Yes.
Because when that deer decides, about the same time you decide shoot, he decides walk. You just went from a chest shot to a gut shot.
Yeah. And this is one of the challenging aspects of long range shooting, is being able to read body language on your quarry.
Yeah.
Because if you can't look at it and say he's likely to move or he's unlikely to move, you have no business taking that shot. Let's look at some other factors. Some people shoot extremely long, and what I call extremely long, let's say 800 plus, on big game with cartridges that I don't think are capable. Just because you can take your 6.5 Creedmoor out and hit an 18-inch steel gong at 800 yards, that's elk vital size, right? Let's say you can hit it every time in a no wind condition, right? That doesn't necessarily mean you're now a lethal elk killer at 800 yards, because you get up in those mountains, you're going to have multiple different wind vectors. Plus, your projectile has lost a lot of energy by then. So, I've seen this so many times with today's modern shooters. They'll get themselves a super cool new rifle chambered in one of our amazing new long range cartridges, and they'll be just incredibly accurate on steel. They don't process the killing mechanism for, to cause an ethical, fast kill on a big game animal way out there.
It's both energy on target and the bullet, the manufacturing of the bullet.
Yes.
Is that bullet designed to have proper expansion at that distance or velocity? You've got to factor all that stuff in.
Yep. And the velocity is another big part of it, because so many bullet designs don't expand well at lower velocities. And that means you're pushing a knitting needle hole through those lungs, assuming you hit it correctly. Right. All those other factors, you got the wind, you've got the puppy in the back of your brain driving because you've got a brain flooded with adrenaline and excitement.
Right.
So many different factors. So, I think you've got to have, to be safe, 2,000 feet per second of impact velocity, and then you have to have enough bullet diameter and weight to ethically kill, whether that's at 300 yards or 600 yards or 1,000 yards.
Now let's help folks out here. How do they understand what their bullet is capable of? How do you know that your bullet will expand adequately at an impact velocity of 2,000? But some of them advertise 1,800 and some of them even 1,600 feet per second. Where do you find that information? It's not usually what you see on the box.
Right. You can typically go to the manufacturer's website these days, and for their cutting edge modern bullets, you can generally find an expansion threshold, the lower velocity that it'll expand and function at. If you can't find that, just call them. They'll put you through to their customer service, and you can find out whether it's a Barnes LRX or a Hornady ELDX or a Federal Terminal Ascent or a Swift Sirocco or any of these great bullets. They'll have that information. You just have to dig for it. The reason I threw out 2,000 feet per second is because that covers pretty much every bullet currently available on the market. There's not a hunting bullet I'm aware of that won't expand reliably at 2,000 feet per second.
Right. I agree with you on that. Okay. Now, this brings us to the modern sleek high BC bullets and how important they are to maintaining that velocity. One of the mistakes I think so many of us make, especially the older gentlemen in the room, is that, well, we're shooting a 300 Win mag or maybe even a 300 Weatherby mag or now even the 300 Rum or there's all kinds of really, really fast ones. We're always locked in on this muzzle velocity and we're not considering, well, what's happening down there? 600 yards. While the bullet plays a huge role in that, it's not just the initial velocity. How do you hang on to velocity at range?
It's all about aerodynamics. The bullet's got to be long and sleek like a speedboat, not short and blunt like a barge going down a canal.
Yep.
And there's a cool example I like to use if I can find the right cartridges here. I've got a 30-06. I've got a 300 Winchester Magnum right here. And if you run that 300 Winchester Magnum with a classic, typical 180 grain flat-based lead nose bullet, and yet you run the 30-06 with a modern, sleek, aerodynamic bullet, something like 190 grain Nosler.
That's just the one I was thinking of, just the one.
That 30-06, by the time you hit about 350 yards, it's carrying as much or more energy and velocity, and it's bucking the wind better than that traditional 300 Winchester Magnum load.
Stop right there. Say that again, folks. Listen to this. All of you who think the 30-06 is a fuddy-duddy old cartridge that's all washed up, just by using the right bullet, you can exceed what is traditionally known as the really high performance 300 Winchester Magnum. And I've done this before on a video talking about the traditional idea of the 300 Win Mag that everyone absorbed over the last half of the 20th century. That's the performance benchmark against which you can judge performance of any cartridge using more modern, sleek, high BC bullets. Efficiency. Of course, you can apply the same thing with the 300 Magnum.
Yeah.
But just take this. You need to come from the perspective of understanding the tradition. When you say, oh, my 300 Win Mag's the one, you're basing that off of what it's done for the last 60 years or so. Now you've got to start to rethink it. Okay, 308 Winchester, 30-06, any of the old dog cartridges can be lifted up to that level of performance. Certainly you can beat it by using the same bullets on the 300 Magnum, but I just want to put that in perspective for folks who run down some of the old standard cartridges.
That's right. And the crazy thing is, if you're still shooting that flat base lead tip bullet in your 300 Win, and a really high BC sleek bullet in your 30-06 at 500 yards, the 06 is outclassing the 300 Winchester Magnum. Pretty cool. Yeah. But there's a family of cartridges that outclasses both of them, and to a point, they can't catch up. Yep. Right? There's no magic solution like putting a space age bullet in an old cartridge now that'll help them catch up. That's these three in the middle. We've got the 300 PRC, the 7mm PRC, and the 6.5 PRC. Now,
I got to stop you here because a whole bunch of people are going to say, oh, God, here we go again with these PRCs. I'm sick of hearing about the PRCs. I'm sick of hearing about high BCs, but you cannot deny it, folks. This is the reality. The reason we're getting these new PRC cartridges is because they've pretty much figured out how to optimize your performance.
Yeah.
And this is the way they do it. And Joseph will talk all about how they do it because he knows.
Well, the great beauty of them is that they're balanced cartridges now. They're not like, so here on the left, we have a 3378 Weatherby, right? That is a rocket of a cartridge at in its time with a light bullet, just laser flat at traditional hunting distances out to say maybe 400, 450 yards, even 500. Yep. But it's not efficient. It's finicky. It burns barrels out.
Yeah.
All these cartridges are efficient. They have pretty good barrel life. They're very easy to handle for accuracy. And they shoot the most optimal long-range bullets available to man today, right? And to people that are saying, oh, here we go again with another new cartridge. We don't need it. We have great cartridges. What do you think traditionalists said when the 300 Winchester Magnum came out? The 7mm Remington Magnum came out.
Anything.
That my 7x57 will do anything I need it to. And candidly, inside 400 yards, it probably still will. But if you're maximizing your reach, whether that's at 400 yards or 600 yards, whatever your personal benchmark is for that extended range mark, it behooves you to use a capable cartridge because it will kill more effectively.
And it's not even just extending your reach. Even within traditional distances, the sleeker bullets produce flatter trajectories, less wind deflection, and more energy. Most guys are just always excited about energy. I need to shoot an elk, so should I get a 338 Lapua? I need enough energy to kill that elk. Well, I always say it's not the energy that kills them, it's the bullet. But still, people understand energy and they want it in the bullet. And the way to not just get energy, but keep the energy in your bullet. These long, sleek bullets aren't just about long-range shooting for flight characteristics. They're about maintaining your energy. If you want a bullet that hits as hard as a 300 Win Mag without having to shoot the recoil of the 300 Win Mag or burn that much powder, et cetera, you look at some of these smaller 6.5 PRC styles.
Especially the 7 PRC.
Yes. Yeah. You're getting it with less powder, less recoil. It's efficiency. Aerodynamic efficiency, powder burning efficiency, purchasing a rifle and the ammunition from the factories that are already tuned for supreme accuracy. It's just efficient all the way through.
Yes. So we've talked a little bit about the cartridge. We probably should touch on the fact that your launch pad, your rifle, and your optic are crucial to long-range hunting. But before we do that, let's just unpack briefly some of the classic quandaries of long-range shooting, right?
There's a quandary, folks.
So let me just set the stage right here. I think the number one problem is people thinking they can hit stuff in the vitals out there at 800, 900, 1200 yards
Yeah.
when they really probably can't. Or if they can, it's not necessarily on the first shot. And I have an example here. I used to shoot F-class competition, colloquially known as belly bench rest, right? Where you go prone with a heavy rifle, 20 pounds or more sometimes, big bipod up front, something that you could just about use for a jack on your pickup truck if you have a flat tire. You got a sandbag under the toe
So
of
you're
your
shooting
stock.
a howitzer is what it sounds like.
Pretty much. And you're shooting at a 10-inch bullseye at 1,000 yards, right? You got a wind flag every 100 yards all the way down, and you get 2 sighters before you shoot for score.
2 sighters.
So you get to look at the wind, you make your best call, you lay down, you fire a careful shot, you fire another shot. Hopefully those 2 land close together, and they give you a really good read on the true wind drift and atmospheric conditions.
But you've got the flag that did you say 100 yards?
Every 100 yards generally. I mean, it varies a little bit depending on the range.
So you've really got optimum conditions for reading the wind. You know exactly the distance. Everything is as good as it's ever going to get, and you're prone. There's no
with
grass
a very
in the way,
heavy rifle.
and the targets aren't bugling.
Yep.
They don't have big antlers to get your heart rate up.
And you're shooting an efficient, low recoiling cartridge with a super accurate match bullet. We're not even talking hunting bullets.
Everything's optimized for making your perfect shot.
And still, most of the best competitors rarely put their first sighter shot inside that 10-inch circle at 1,000 yards. We can consider that a deer's vital size, right?
Easily, yeah.
If you have any question about whether the best hunters in the world, the best long-range hunters in the world can make first-round impacts every time at 1,000 yards, I'm here to tell you they can't. And it's important to note, though, I don't want to insult some of those guys because there are guys that have made a life of perfecting this type of hunting. Mm-hmm. And some of them can, but those are the guys that are ethical enough not to take that shot in the wind. Not to take that shot when an animal is agitated and potentially moving. They will only take that shot under ideal conditions. Mm-hmm. Most of us don't have either the discipline to hold off like that or the experience to recognize all those conditions.
Now, Joseph, does this work for you or any of these top-notch 1,000-yard shooters from field positions? Or do they have to always be on that good solid prone with the bipod up front?
I think the answer to that is yes and no. Ideally, you're prone with a bipod and some kind of something underneath the toe of your stock for stability. However, you can build that type of a position off of a big rock. You can do it hanging off of a ledge as long as you've got something solid to put your bipod legs in. You can do it. I don't recommend it. It's not really, getting into the backcountry, but you can do it off your truck hood.
So that's how you get out in the backcountry. I was wondering about that.
There's a lot of ways you can adapt a good bipod, and even your spare socks wadded up underneath the toe of your stock to achieve the stability necessary for a shot like that. But there's so many other factors as well.
Have you ever taken an extreme range shot? What would you call it? That you just used something fairly quick and simple. My measure of it is a standard portable bipod, shooting sticks. Cross sticks, right? They're so quick. They're so handy. I'm good with those to probably 500 yards. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I've ever tried it farther, but I've tried it enough times on targets where I'm confident that I'm going to nail them every time at 400. And I can, when I'm really steady and I get some elbow support or pack under my arm, I'm steady enough to do a 500-yard shot. Where do you draw the line, and how do you use your field position to get that stability?
Here's where practicing a lot is just invaluable, and having scenarios thrown at you where you don't necessarily get to pick what your assets are. You might be presented with a stump to shoot off of. You might have to use sticks. A lot of guys these days are using a tripod, a big, heavy tripod that locks on the bottom of their forend. I'm not a big proponent of that for reasons we can talk about another time. It works, but it's a bit slow, and you have to have a tripod that's capable of holding your rifle up. Then you have to have a rifle that you can clamp onto. I'm a backcountry hunter. I like to hunt with lightweight gear. So I've made some pretty long shots from some really weird improvised positions, but I've never squeezed I've never squeezed that trigger until the crosshairs were steady. Right?
Yeah.
So when you ask, what's where do you draw the line? What's the maximum? I typically preach in my writing for various magazines on the Backcountry Hunting podcast that I host. I preach what I call quarter mile capability, 440 yards. So my stepdad was a jockey, an old jockey of considerable skill, and we had a lot of good times at little regional horse races, and a quarter mile is 440 yards.
Right.
And so that number kind of became significant to me, but let's round it up to 450 yards for easy reckoning in the field, right? I think every serious Western hunter or hunter that dreams of hunting the West should strive to achieve quarter mile capability. Let's take that a step further. 20, 30 years ago, before really good laser rangefinders and dial-up turrets and advanced reticles helped us reach out further and further, 400 yards was a hard shot.
Mm-hmm.
Most hunters were, they had to work, they had to practice to figure out their holdover and so forth to make a 400-yard shot reliably on a deer-sized target, right? I think today, what with our advanced equipment and long-range bullets and so forth, that 600 yards is kind of the new 400 yards. To me, anything past 600 yards, you're into that extreme range hunting. Now, I know a lot of guys think extreme range is past 1,000 yards. I'm not one of them.
No.
If you're going to shoot at game past 600, you really have to live that life and have your ducks in a row.
Yeah. Now, Joseph, it sounds like you and I are both coming down to somewhere around that 600 yard being our ultimate long range. We really don't want to go farther than that. And I think for a lot of shooters, it's going to be more like 400 yards, depending on what your training and practice are. But once again, we're getting back to that long range shooting and the joy of it and the value of it, in that it does make you a better 300, 400, 500 yard shot if you can consistently shoot 6, 8, and 1,000 yards. So enjoy your target shooting. And, to me, it's not so much about the long reach and the targets at 1,000 yards as it is honing your field positions, your trigger control, and all the things that you have to do to be a successful shot, regardless of the distance. That's what's going to pay off on those more, shall we say, acceptable long-range shots.
Yeah.
Are you going to come down to a hard and fast number on this, Joseph?
I don't think so. I think I would take a little different approach and lay it on the individual. So, folks, if you think you want to attempt this long-range hunting game, there are certain things you must keep in mind. You have to master them. I've written up a little list here. These are the bullet points, challenges that face the long-range hunter, right? So you got to master field positions. You got to know how to judge wind. You got to understand bullet construction and how velocity affects it. You got to have a cartridge that has adequate precision and adequate authority on impact way out there. You have to make an art and understand the science of recovering game that's shot a long way off. Exponentially more difficult there. And then you have to decide for yourself what your maximum ethical range is, and you have to have the discipline to stick to it.
Whew. So would you come up 4 or 5 of them there?
Oh, there's probably more than that.
Yeah, I was going to say there are a few more things, but that's a good starter list, kind of the basics. And is one any more important than the other?
No, I don't think so, because any one of these coming unraveled destroys the whole thing.
Yeah.
It can, result in a shot that's astray a little bit, a gut shot animal, or, something that's hit, just not killed cleanly. We can take these apart and just unpack each individually very quickly. The field positions takes practice and training and repetitive training to master these. Wind judging, man, you've got to burn out barrels to become a master of wind judging. Yeah.
Wait, we better throw in the wind meter, because that really helps.
It does. Yeah.
The little wind meter that you can buy. Kestrel's kind of the big name in the game. Any others that you can think of?
You can get less expensive ones from Caldwell and some other brands,
some of those.
Even just some weather stations designed for mountain climbers or whatever. But really, if you're going to be that guy, get a Kestrel. That's the top of the line.
The nice thing about these little wind meters is just a little device that has a little propeller spinner thing inside of it, and you hold it to the wind. And that first of all, it starts to teach you which direction the wind's coming from, because a lot of folks really can't quite tell. And you turn that and you go, oh, you maximize it. It's 3 miles an hour. You turn it a little bit. Now it's 10 miles an hour. Then it's down to 4. Okay, 10. Oh, there's your wind direction and the speed. And then you judge that against how it feels, or how the leaves are blowing, how the grass is blowing. And that's where your art comes in. You start to read the wind.
Yes.
But you don't have to shoot. That's the nice thing about the wind meter. Just walk around every day when you're outside, whatever. Check the wind.
Yep. Learn to judge the wind.
Yes.
Then you shoot to learn its effect. And you got to learn to compensate for multiple vectors, because at long range, you rarely have one consistent wind.
Yep. All right. Good.
Next on my list, bullet construction. Man, this is a topic we need to address in a single episode, I think.
I think so, yes.
You have to have a bullet that's capable of expanding at low speeds reliably and yet holding together at high impact velocities, in case you stand up a Boone and Crockett buck at 40 yards as you're hiking up the hill to your glassing spot.
And I would venture to guess more people take games at 40 yards than they do at 500.
Certainly. Yep. And then, of course, adequate authority. We talked about this a little bit. I have seen so many times people get really comfortable with a mild little cartridge like the 6.5 Creedmoor. Great deer cartridge, adequate for elk within its comfort zone. But if you stretch it way out, you're asking for trouble, right? Mm-hmm. If you're going to shoot way out there, by all means, shoot something that hits hard enough to kill cleanly. Bullet diameter, bullet weight, momentum, probably more important than energy in the end.
Right.
And then, of course, recovering game. You better be a tracker, and really you should have a spotter. It's just darn near irresponsible to shoot long range on game if you're solo.
Oh, absolutely.
The guys that I know that do it nearly ethically will put a phone scope type thing on their spotting scope, and they film the animal so while they shoot, they can go in and see exactly where they hit it, what its reaction was, what bush it was standing by, what direction it went, and so forth. But you're better off with a partner that can keep eyes on it and then signal you in.
Joseph, this is an extreme, but I have hunted with a few folks who were no good at that. They would shoot, and not only did they not know exactly where the animal was when they shot, and whether or not they even hit it, I don't know if they close their eyes after the shot or they lose the sight picture and can't find it again.
Yep.
They didn't even have the basic direction. Was it east of where you were sitting, or was it south of where you were sitting? I don't know. It was out there somewhere. Oh my goodness. And by the time we found those deer, the coyotes had beat us to them. And they had eaten like a fourth of them.
Yeah, it'll happen. And sometimes you never find them.
Yeah.
It's very important to learn the art. Again, it's an art of mentally memorizing where your quarry was standing when you shoot, and then watching its response, where it goes, if it goes. I mean, ideally it falls within sight. Still, by the time you've hiked 800 yards across a canyon, it's real hard to find the spot where it was standing. So having a spotter, a buddy there to guide you in, is super important. And in the end, you really have to decide for yourself, folks. You can't decide for anybody else. You have to take the responsibility to do the practice. Burn out those barrels in learning to shoot well from field positions and in varying winds. Choose wisely your equipment, your cartridge, your bullet, the most important aspect. And then test yourself from those challenging field positions. Once you've determined how far away you can hit a deer vital size steel target, hold yourself to that. Be ethical. Exercise some discipline. Even if that 220-inch mule deer stands up on a ridge 900 yards away, well, if you've confirmed that you're good to 650 yards, get closer.
Yeah. And the thing about be ethical, it's easy to say be ethical, but exactly what is that? Too many of us, I think, have an ethical standard that works for us, and then we insist that everyone else must do the same.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're unethical. We sort of climb up on our moral high horse.
Yep.
I get it, but it doesn't necessarily wash with everyone, because I know fellas who shouldn't be shooting past 200 yards or maybe even 100 yards. So one man's close range is another man's slam dunk is another man's too far. It's highly variable. It all comes down to the individual and your gear and that combination. So cut your fellow hunters a little bit of slack. Certainly we can all identify the slob hunter who just willy-nilly shoots and doesn't really know what he's doing, but Don't insist that everyone adhere to your ethical standard of a 300-yard shot being maximum. They may be fully capable of a 4 or a 5. They may be just stick with 50.
Yeah. Yep. And it's important to know, too, that obviously, Ron, neither you or I are proponents of extreme range shooting a game. We're talking through these bullet points to demonstrate the challenge, how really hard it is
Yeah.
to become proficient at this game. And most folks will never put in that time.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think as long as we all have our best interests and our hunting heritage best interest, and most importantly, the interest of wildlife, that is foremost. We are
Yeah.
here enjoying the fruits of our grandfather's labors, which was restoring North American wildlife and African wildlife, as far as that goes. Anywhere in the world where we have good huntable populations of game, it's because of hunters. And we have done our thing, and we need to continue that responsibility as hunters of today, whether we shoot close range, long range, archery, rifle, whatever. Being a hunter comes with the responsibilities to the animals we hunt. That, for me, is the baseline.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're running out of time here, folks. So I really want to thank Joseph Von Benedikt from Backcountry Hunting Podcast for joining us again. We just always enjoy having you, Joseph. You bring a lot to the table.
It's a pleasure to be here, Ron.
Well, let's get together again soon, and we'll maybe get into some of the specifics on choosing the right bullet to match up with your cartridge and the distance at which you expect to get your game and all the rest of it. So we want to thank everyone for joining us on Ron Spomer Outdoors. Until next time, hunt honest and shoot straight.